Hello, everybody, and welcome to Faster Masters Rowing Radio, where having a rowing coach only makes you better. Following a program gives you a true pathway to becoming a confident rower who's respected by your peers. You can become the athlete you want to row with. I'm Rebecca Caro, and I'm joined as ever by my co-host, Marley Royal.
Hi, Rebecca, and hello to our Faster Masters Rowing Radio audience. Say that 5 times fast.
After a gin and tonic, yeah. Yes, we are definitely encouraging you all to drink. That was a joke. Please don't take this literally.
Right.
Now, our sponsor this week is UniDragon. It's the time of year where you know you're going to need to find a unique gift for the Christmas holidays. And don't we all know how hard that is? It's got to be novel. It must be an exciting gift. And ideally, it should get a wow when it's been unwrapped. The challenge bar is set high. But Faster Masters have found an answer. UniDragon make unique, colourful puzzles that not only challenge your assembly skills, but hidden within each puzzle are animal silhouettes disguised as puzzle pieces. It's a little hard to describe exactly what it is. So go and have a look yourself. Go to unidragon.com. That's UNI Dragon. Or search for UniDragon puzzle, and you'll see what I mean. There are designs shaped like owls, a wolf, a little row of birds, a tiger, and I really like the fantasy phoenix. The colors and styling are stunning, and each one can become an artwork in its own right. But go look for those tiny little embedded animals. They really make the UniDragon puzzle a gift to treasure long after Christmas is over. And you can snag yourself a 10% discount coupon using the coupon rowing841 at unidragon.com. Now, we've got, as ever, our wonderful podcast supporters. We got some new ones in this month, so very, very warm welcome to all of you. And if you feel that you learned something helpful from this podcast, go to fastermastersrowing.com/podcast, and you can make a donation starting from $1. We very much hope that you are valuing and finding useful what we are doing. If you're watching live, you can write a comment underneath the live stream, wherever you're watching, if you want to join in the conversation. And we've already had someone joining us from Whidbey. Well, we know who that is. Safe from the atmospheric river storm, of course, which has been hitting the west coast of the USA and Canada this past week, isn't it?
Yes, it was an absolutely incredible storm. And actually, so, we'd like to send out our regards to, I would say, the people in the Seattle area, Pacific Northwest, Vancouver, Victoria, very, very hard hit from the Pineapple Express is what it was called. And it was literally a atmospheric river storm. There were places where there were 300 millimeters of rain within a 24-hour period. So a lot of damage to roads, flooding, docks, a lot of cleanup going on in that area of southern BC and Washington State.
And what good fortune that Rowing Canada Aviron managed to complete their national championships the day before it hit.
I know, unbelievable, but quite an event. Holy moly.
Yeah. The press photographs have been scary.
Very much so.
Now, this past week is the part of the show where we talk about the work that we're doing to advocate more broadly for Masters Rowing. And I'd like to show you my photograph. My photograph is by Stephen Robinson, and it's a picture of me and Nikki in a double, taken on a day when he's a professional photographer, not a sport photographer as such, but he came down to help me out take some images, and it was really misty and foggy, and we got these wonderful atmospheric images. And in fact, if you look on the Faster Masters website, there's a picture with for the sign up pop-up for our newsletter, and it's a picture of a women's quad carrying their boat off the water, and that was actually taken on the same day. What have you been up to this past week, Marlene, for general things?
Well, yesterday I participated in the Rowing Canada Safe Sport webinar. So I was the representative for my club, Aviron Knowlton Rowing. And Rowing Canada is putting in place an entire new initiative for safe sport policies and harmonizing how complaints are dealt with on the nationwide level within the rowing community and systematizing it. So it's a big the next step initiative of Rowing Canada to make rowing clubs very diverse, friendly, welcoming, and safe environments for people of all ages training, and to create really a positive sport atmosphere. So that was quite a big, interesting webinar yesterday. So that's what I was up to.
And I've been reading around the web, and I found that British Rowing are doing a consultation on their strategy review. The link is on their website if you go onto their news page, and they've made a microsite which summarizes by a whole load, like about 20 different subsidiary areas, what their forward strategy is going to be. And we encourage anyone who's listening to go to the Masters section, click on that, and then there's an email address where you can send your feedback in if you're a British Rowing member or if you're living in Great Britain and want to participate. It's not just for British Rowing members, it is for rowers in Britain. Separately, in New Zealand, Karapiro Rowing Inc., which is the organisation that runs rowing on Lake Karapiro, are looking for a board chairman. So if you would like to give back to the sport and you have a little bit of governance experience, they would be very interested in hearing from you. So please just get in touch with me if you want the link, and I can put you through to the team that are handling that search. Okay. Our topic this week is about peaking. And this has come about because we got a very interesting email from one of our Faster Masters who's in Australia, who's trying to understand the transition from the long distance races through to the 1K races. So in Australia, in a normal year, they would be doing the Head of the Yarra, which is a 5K long distance race this month in November. It's not happening because of, we know why. But once you have done your long distance race, and if you are familiar with Faster Masters, you know that our programs are structured into two basic areas: training towards a 1K race or training towards a 5K race. So both of these are called peaks. And for masters who race and for masters who want to plan their year, whether you race or not, it's helpful to think about a couple of focus points in a 12-month calendar period. What are those focus points? And it gives you then a focus in your training as well to build up to a peak. So Marlene, physiologically, what is a peak?
Well, your peak is, as you said, it's based on gearing up for a big performance at an important race. And when you peak, essentially, you're coming off a long period of training, and you want to be, in the simplest terms, you want to be as rested and prepared as you possibly can be when you go to your starting line. So that involves a period of time, the length of which the taper period depends really on how much you're training, what your training volume is. The higher your training volume, the longer the taper period might be. But let's say it's from 14 days to 7-day period, for example, leading up to this peak. So it's the period of time when you start to decrease your training volume to allow and sharpen up your technique, and basically you're allowing for recovery. So you want to kind of what we call compensate, get all your systems rested, get mentally rested, get physiologically rested, get all your glycogen stores replaced in your muscles. When you're really tired and your muscles are kind of achy and your legs feel heavy, that's when your glycogen levels are low, because you use this, this is used in the muscle metabolism when you're training. And when you're training for a long period of time, you're always a little bit depleted all the time. This is where nutrition comes in a lot to replenish it, but you're always depleted a little bit during long training phases, because you're always carrying some degree of fatigue. So the peak pushes you up to basically a fully rested state, and I like to think of this like you are chomping at the bit, ready to go. I like to get people to that point if possible. It's a real art to taper, to taper it and nail it on the day, sometimes to nail it on the hour. We do try to do that as coaches. So generally, you can aim for maybe 2 major peaks. 3 is already starting to become a lot. I know I certainly see with masters athletes, if you try to have 3 serious peaks, one of them is probably not going to work out. That's just my experience. Yeah.
But this is per year. You can have 2, possibly 3 major peaks.
Correct. And the in-between times, you have to look at when was your peak, and then when is the next major event. Now, sometimes there could be a situation where you have 2 important races within a same taper period, like a week and then a week. They're very close together. You can kind of put them together. So it does matter. But the important thing to identify is like every single race isn't a peak. Okay, that's what we're trying to identify. So you want to look at your season, your winter. Are you really big on your erg events? That might be a major peak for you. February might be a major peak. Then you might say, okay, I'm going to have my next peak at the national championships. And depending where you live, that could be in May, or it could be in late August. So the in-between times are when you look at how you structure your training leading up to those important times.
So when you are looking at planning your year, it's best to get out the regatta calendar, get a blank sheet of paper, scroll through it, and look at all of the races that you think you might like to do. Now, by definition, a peak is exactly what it sounds like. It is the top. It is the one big event. So in general, as a rule of thumb, you'll want probably 1 in the winter and 1 in the summer. And as Marlene's hinted, it's possible to have a 3rd if you really need it. When you look at your events and you sort of mark them down in a draft calendar, quite often you will find that there's a bunch of races that happen over an upcoming period leading towards a peak. And that's deliberate. The regatta organizers design it like that, thankfully for us. And so as you acquire more skill, you can go and practice it in a race environment. It is generally not wise to plan a peak and not do any practice races. Even if those practices are at home or in simulated race conditions, when you're, racing a friend over Zoom, it's still always worth doing that, because the practice of the pressure situation is part of your preparation. Now, after you've done one peak, let's say for the sake of argument, your winter peak, you cannot carry on training to get to a summer peak. The line of your effort rises to the peak, and then it must fall in a reset before you can rise to a higher subsequent peak. That is a really important concept for you guys to understand, because a lot of particularly massively competitive people say that they can't understand why they have to back off and only train 2 or 3 times in a week when they've been used to training 6 times in a week after they've done their peak event. So this is not about the pre-race taper. This is about the reset after a peak.
Well, and I think after a major event, you have to have a regeneration period. So how much time you need depends on how long your season is. Depends how hard you worked. I think it's easy for people to underestimate the mental toll it takes. You know, when you've come off of a long period of really focused training and you complete that rest, it's not just about physical rest, it's about mental recuperation too, because you've had so much focus and so much concentration that you have to allow your body to recover, do some different, perfect time for cross training, perfect time to take a few days off, depending on what you're doing. Recovery is good for you. You don't get into shape when you're racing, you get into shape after you finished racing. But I think a lot of times the mental toll is quite strong, and it's important to catch up on things at home that you were putting off because you were really focused on training. Do some things that you don't have time to do when you're in the racing season and you've got really regular early morning practices. So it's a good time to catch up on odds and ends, get your house in order again, get a little bit, refocus, do some different things for variety and freshness. And then maybe you go back into your base phase and you start building up, and how long that phase is going to depend on when your next event is.
Now, rowing is a strength endurance sport, and base fitness is an important component of our training. You're all familiar with this. So, Marlene, what should people work on if they're trying to build base fitness? And if you are a person who is returning to rowing, or you are new to the sport, this also applies to you.
Well, when we're looking at base training, first of all, we look at bringing the intensity down, building up some aerobic base, so that you've got a basic level of endurance. Because, when especially if you're racing sprint races, you might actually lose some endurance in the second half of the season because you're doing a lot of high interval work, which is very, very good for your top end fitness and very good for your shape. But you might want to get back to some of that low intensity base fitness, because that's also, that's your foundation that you build on. So we've talked about polarized training before, and that you train low or you train high, and we, in rowing, we mix a little bit in the middle very carefully because of our specific race distances, but generally you want to train low or train high. And so your base fitness is going to be your lower stroke rates, say under 22, under 20, your technique work. It's a great time to get back to taking care of some of those flaws you didn't have time to correct when you were working so hard rowing fast. Technical, basic distance, a little bit of extra time. This is where cross training fits in really, really well, is in that low intensity, get out on the bike for a couple of hours, or, run or hike if you like to do that. Really good to use just some different muscles. You're still going to get that aerobic base benefit, and getting yourself back into routine to build back into your strength. So in terms of resistance training or strength training, it's a nice time perhaps to add in some circuits, some things that include different motions that are different from rowing specific motions that are going the same direction as the stroke is. So it's a good time to do some lateral stuff. It's a good time to do side to side motions. It's the best time for circuits or body weight work. So that fits in really well in the base training. And then you're going to move back into your specific strength training. So it's variety, it's good conditioning, it's interesting. Little bit more time on the water, if you can afford it, is great.
So when you join Faster Masters, we request that you do a fitness assessment, and the fitness assessment appraises 3 different things. So, Marlene, can you just run through those 3 things and explain where the base fitness helps?
Well, in the fitness assessment, there are 4 tests. So there's a peak power test, which is really short, like 10 seconds. There is a 1K test, which tests your top end fitness. Okay, how fast can you go for 1K? Your middle distance strength endurance is going to be your tempo anaerobic thresholds, your 20-minute. Your aerobic base is your 75-minute. Sometimes people go, oh my God, 75 minutes. This is rowing. It's an endurance sport. And yes, we need to row 75 minutes. So what you do is you want to look at those figures compared to your VO max, which is like your 1K. And we look at the wattages, and your peak power should have a certain relationship. We call it proportional fitness. So your peak power should have a certain relationship to that. If your peak power is low, that's going to keep everything low. Okay, your peak power is like your ceiling. So if your ceiling's low, no matter how good your endurance is, you're going to get to a certain point and you're not going to get better. Your base fitness is going to tell us, well, is the bottom of your pyramid narrow or wide? And the wider the bottom of your pyramid is, the better, because you've got a lot more room for training between the base and the peak, which gives you a lot more leeway in your training in terms of managing your intensities, which is really important. It's also very important for your recovery ability. If you do not have a good aerobic base, you're going to have a difficult time recovering from higher intensity work. So it's not about speed. It does contribute physiologically up to the top, but it is quite a lot about your technical training. It's quite a lot about your ability to recover from harder work, because you have more blood capillaries that help remove metabolic waste from your muscles and helps you recover faster, which is important for a master's rower if they're at a regatta where they're racing several events. So that can be quite important.
And it's probably going to be in your 3rd year of rowing that you really begin to see the benefits in your base fitness. There are a couple of reasons for that. One is that when you are learning blade work, it's incredibly difficult to work hard if you don't have skillful oar work, and you need to learn that technique, and you will learn that technique. The more skillful you become in handling the oars, the harder you will be able to work the blades through the water, and your body will start to respond by becoming fitter. And as I said, it's generally that 3rd year where you really begin to acquire a really good, robust base fitness. Don't let this discourage you. You can build your fitness gradually over time. And a lot of people come to rowing having been fit in other sports, and that absolutely contributes as well. If you've been a total couch potato and you come to rowing, your experience will not be the same as someone who's come off of being a netballer or a long distance runner, or, some other swimming, or lots of other sports.
I think that's a very good point, Rebecca, that if you are new to rowing, at first, you're going to have to include some cross training to stay fit, because you won't have the blade handling and the control over the oar in the boat to work very hard at first. So there is going to be a certain period of time, learning curve, before you can feel like you actually get a good workout. And so, I think you have to allow for that and do some extra stuff on land if you're new to rowing, and or new to rowing a single, for example. You're definitely not going to be able to row hard when you first get into a single. So you've got to plan maybe some erg work, some running, some gym work, just plan to do something to complement that from a fitness point of view.
Yeah. And when you're doing it, generally speaking, you want to have a light sweat. You're not going to be panting and out of breath doing base fitness work. But at the end of the outing, you might feel that your muscles have had a workout. They're not necessarily sore, but that feeling where you've done a workout, and later on in the day, you run up a flight of stairs of maybe 10 steps, and you think, oh, I can really feel my legs, you know. Actually, sometimes it's the day after, the delayed onset muscle soreness, DOMS, comes in. So that's the sort of feeling that you get with base fitness. You're not likely to be, you know, completely losing it. Some people, you know, respond very differently. So I'm not being judgmental here, but it is a low cadence. And actually, that gives you plenty of time to breathe. But it also can be a challenge to you to say, how hard am I working? Could I up the intensity somewhat? So if you're an experienced rower, you will know what the intensity through the water feels like. And you might find as you get fitter that you can up your intensity and still be working at the right training zone.
Well, that's one way. I think being careful not to work that intensity too hard. But if you're seeing, for example, that you're able to row the relative, say, the same effort, and you're going faster, that's a really good sign that your fitness is improving. You still want to keep it conversational level, okay? Conversational level, because the biggest mistake masters athletes make is that they train this category too hard. And the lower heart rates, the lower intensity is what helps strengthen your cardiac muscle. You give your heart a little bit more time to expand, and then it contracts stronger, pumps more blood. So the way that you improve your stroke volume is by working at these lower heart rates, lower intensity. That's what actually helps strengthen the cardiac muscles. When you get to high intensity, that's about oxygen transport. It's a bit of a different thing. So here you want to strengthen your heart and use fat as a primary fuel during this type of training, and have that kind of melting effect after you finish, like you want to just go take a nice nap, I would say.
Right. I will remember that.
If you can. If not, like,
yeah,
you have to go to work, but maybe you can schedule it a little bit later.
Precisely. So just to recap, through your year, you're going to have a couple of different peaks. You will build towards them. Those peaks can be, you know, you can be doing both of them can be 1K peaks. They don't have to have a 1 and a 5K peak. They need to be spaced out in time. You need to plan events leading up to a peak. You get a taper in the 7 to 14 days before the peak event. And then after the peak event, you want a reset period, which is at least 2 weeks, where you're doing different sorts of training or completely resting. That is absolutely fine. You should probably plan on having at least a week a year where you're not doing anything. You don't have to be sitting in a deck chair on a beach, but you're not doing anything heavily aerobic. You know, it might be you're doing some walking.
Yes, absolutely. And also pay attention to how you're feeling mentally. I think it's important when you go into your next phase that you feel ready for it. You say, yeah, I want to go into winter training. I'm like ready to go into winter training, not like, oh yeah, I gotta get myself on the erg again. You know, so if you're feeling like you're dragging your butt, I think you probably need a little bit more time, because you will know when, okay, like you start thinking about your goals. Okay, yeah, I'm ready to get back on the erg. You need to get yourself into that frame of mind. Otherwise, you may need just a little bit more recovery, and take it, There's no problem to have a little bit more.
Exactly. It won't affect your peak performance because that's several months in the future.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I will remind people of is that there is no shame in having rest.
Not at all.
You know, being a maniac is not going to help you age well, and it's not actually going to help your peak performance. So be nice, be kind to your body. It's your friend.
Yes, absolutely. And rest is important. And when Rebecca was mentioning the races you have leading up to a peak, you may have a race every weekend or every other week. How it depends on the league you're in and where you're racing. But I think it's important to look at those races and prioritize them and decide, like, these are A races And these races are B races. And you still want to go race those races, but maybe you try a different lineup in your boat. Let's just try it and see how this goes. This isn't such a big high stress race. Let's see what happens. Maybe you use those races to define your race plan, to try different strategies. So definitely look at your schedule and decide, like, okay, this race and this race, these have my better competition for leading up to my big race. I want to go to these other little races, you know what, just to go down the course, just to go out of the starting blocks, just to practice going to bed at night and getting ready for your race in the morning. Go through the whole routine. So those, less prioritized races can still, be very, very helpful for you to work out the details that you want for your more important races.
Yeah. A very good example from when I lived in Cambridge in the UK is something called the Winter League, which is run on the CAM, and it's one race per month, January, February, March, leading up to the Tideway 8 heads. So oftentimes people will choose to do these races in the 8 crews that they're going to be racing in the really big events, which is later on in March. And they can do the Winter League races twice in a day if they want. So you might choose to do it once in a big boat, once in a small boat.
Mm-hmm.
And the way the league works is it's the cumulative total of your time over each of the 3 races. So the person with the least time wins.
Those are great. It's nice when clubs do things like that too, because those are, again, practices. You need practices.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And that's huge fun. Bedford also does some really good winter races. That's a 2K race, and you can race, I think they run it 8 times in a day.
Okay.
Great opportunity to try different lineups, do one race, stop, have a rest, come back, and an hour and a half later go and do the exact same race again.
Mm-hmm.
And try something different. And for coaches as well, it's a lovely way of assessing your crews and seeing what happens through the day. And of course, wind and weather can change. So, not all times are comparable, but that doesn't necessarily mean you've wasted your time going to an event. You don't have to peak for these events. So you just treat them as okay, I will have Friday off. When we load our boats on Thursday night, we'll rest on Friday and we'll get ready to race on Saturday. So that's not a peaking taper. It's just your day off.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even have to take a day off before a race like that. You just might do a couple of days. You might do a day before you're just doing a light paddle and practicing some racing starts, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
I love planning seasons. It's fun.
Yes,
now, I
is.
also want to talk about people who are not planning on racing. You're an important part of the Masters community. And for you guys, actually knowing what you want to do through a year is also important. Your goals might not be the same as the racing people's goals, self-evidently. Let's say your goals are based around skill, around your personal fitness, around your endurance, around your commitment to exercise regularly, around putting a crew together that can, row well together and, have a good time. So you should also plan your season, and your plan can be based around things that are perhaps not to do with rowing. So you might plan, when's your summer holiday going to be? Okay, I know we're going to go away for a fortnight in July or August. Therefore, I will plan that will be my downtime. That will be my reset time. And then when I come back after that, I'm going to be expecting to do at least 4 to 6 weeks of base fitness, which might be training at a lower intensity, all the good things that Marlene was talking about earlier, before we get back into the crew and start to do some, training pieces at slightly higher rates or greater intensities, or timed pieces over a particular distance or time. So just because you're not planning on racing does not mean that you shouldn't plan your season. And so particularly if we're in a regular crew, talk around the crew and find out perhaps you can, coordinate that everybody takes their holidays in August, and we'll have the whole month as a kind of, well, if I'm around, I'll just row with other people, or I'll single, and that is a good reset for the whole crew. And it then allows you to decide, what your focus is for the crew, and set that focus into a goal which is meaningful for you. And I don't mind what that goal is. It might be we want to be able to row 2K square blades. That's a great goal to have. How are you going to build up to acquiring those skills and the fitness required to be able to row 2K at good pressure square blades? Now, that might be a completely meaningless goal, and I might have picked a really bad example there, but you get what I'm talking about. You are as important as the racing masters. We're all part of the community together, and it will help you to enjoy it. You might plan, for example, on having a crew supper. We're going to finish off at the end of July. We're all going to go out and have a nice meal together, and then we're going to have August off, and then we'll get back into it again. Thank you for the compliments from some of our online listeners. Always nice to hear feedback from those of you who are joining us live. Any final words, Marlene, on peaking and planning your season?
Yeah, well, spend some time doing it, and, set some goals, think about what you want to achieve, and then, you just start making little steps and little notes. And remember, all plans can be changed and revised. So as your goals might change at some point during the season, just revise them and go to it. And it doesn't matter whether it could be a race. It might but just be like you have a neat island and you want to build up to being able to go row around the island or do a lap around the lake, or that could be your own tour of some sort. Could be another goal for our rowers who don't race a lot, so you can still have some pretty, you can have some pretty substantial goals as well. It's very personal.
Absolutely. And I would certainly love to hear some of your goals. So if people have goals that they'd like to share with us, just, share them on social with us, and that'd be fun. It's always nice to get different perspectives. So this has been Faster Masters Rowing Radio, the show dedicated to masters athletes who want fun, fitness, and confidence in their rowing. You can become a student of the sport by buying a Faster Masters Rowing program subscription today. Go to fastermastersrowing.com/join. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye.